The HOA president is standing right on my dock holding a clipboard, and she's demanding that I tear it down in just 48 hours. She has no idea that I legally own every single drop of water she's looking at. It's 7 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I'm sitting there sipping my coffee on the dock I built myself, watching the morning mist rise off the lake like soft smoke. The wood creaks under my feet, strong and honest work that made it through to tough winters. Then I hear the sharp click of fancy high heels on my wooden planks. Brenda Thornfield comes marching toward me like she owns everything. "This ugly thing is ruining our property values," she snaps, waving papers in my face. "You have 48 hours to take it down, or we're coming after your house." My coffee tastes bitter now. The air, smelling like pine trees, feels colder. This dock was the last thing my late wife Sarah and I planned together before cancer took her. "Away, ma'am," I say quietly. "You might want to check those property lines again." Little did she know, I didn't just own the dock, owned the whole lake system. What would you do if some HOA Karen tried to steal your dead wife's final dream? Drop your wildest HOA nightmare below. Where are you watching from? Please tell me your area. Isn't this insane? Let me back up and tell you how a grieving widower ended up owning more water than SeaWorld. My name's Garrett Morrison. And 2 years ago, I thought I was buying a quiet spot to retire and heal my broken heart. Instead, I bought myself a war. With a neighborhood Karen, I'm 58. Just retired after 30 years designing bridges that don't fall down and water systems that actually work. 3 years ago, cancer stole my wife Sarah. We had 32 years of marriage, gone in 18 hard months. We'd planned this lakefront dream house together, drawing dock designs while she was between chemo treatments. She made me promise to build it. Even if she wasn't there to see it. "You're too stubborn to let some lake beat you," she'd whispered during our last good week. So, I kept that promise and moved to Millbrook Lake Estates. It's a picture-perfect community with 47 homes around a clean 200-acre lake. Houses cost between $400,000 and $800,000. Doctors, small business owners, RAID teachers live there, the kind of place where neighbors wave instead of calling the code people. The dock project saved my mind. 6 months of careful building, every permit filed right, every bolt tightened perfectly. The county inspector called it art that looks like a strong structure. Sarah would have loved the sunrise view from those smooth cedar planks, feeling nice under bare feet. Then the Thornfield invasion started. Brenda Thornfield. Imagine if a real estate photo came to life and decided to run your neighborhood. She's 52, with blonde highlights that cost more than my monthly groceries, and a smile that makes smart people hide their wallets. She bought the biggest house on the lake 3 years ago, a huge colonial house that screams, "My kitchen cost more than your car." Her husband Rick runs Thornfield Construction, which does overpriced okay work. Together, they're like a 2-person team making everything fancier. Within 8 months, Brenda talked her way into being HOA president. The old board, mostly folks in their 70s who thought adults could handle their own property, quit rather than deal with her ideas for a perfect community. Her first big fight, making all waterfront structures look the same to keep property values high. That means everyone's dock has to be identical and built by, you guessed it, her husband's company. I pulled out my permits, my building reports, my county approvals, everything real, professional, and legal. Brenda looked at them like they were drawn with crayons. "Permits don't beat community standards, Mr. Morrison," she said, standing in my driveway with her scary clipboard. The morning sun sparkled on her big diamond ring as she waved her hand like it didn't matter. "This industrial ugly thing hurts our nice look." Industrial ugly thing? My dock was handmade cedar with brass parts curving naturally along the shore, like it belonged there. But Brenda liked Rick's plastic floating platforms better. They cost 3 times more, half as well made, and half the neighborhood already had them. The violation notice blew in the lake breeze, smelling like her fancy perfume mixed with diesel from Rick's big truck. $500 a day if I didn't tear down the non-matching structure in 72 hours. Plus, they'd put a lien on my house. "Emergency powers to protect the community," she said. Like she was from a cop show, I stood there, gravel crunching under my work boots. watching this woman threaten to destroy the last thing tying me to my wife's memory, the dock where I talk, to Sarah's ghost every morning, where I scattered some of her ashes on our anniversary. "Ma'am," I said quietly, "you might want to double-check your authority on that." That evening, I sat on my supposedly illegal dock, listening to water slap against the posts like soft clapping. A loon called across the lake, that wild, lonely sound that cuts through neighborhood nonsense. I thought about Sarah's favorite saying, "When bullies pick on engineers, they usually regret it." Time to visit the county records office and see exactly what I'd inherited. The next morning, I drove to the county assessor's office with my coffee still hot and my engineer's brain in detective mode. You know what I learned from 30 years of building things? Someone says you can't do something? Check the plans first. Argue later. Dolores Martinez has worked that records desk since Reagan was president. She's the kind who remembers every weird property fight, every boundary argument, every who owns what drama. When I explained Brenda's dock order, her old face lit up like Christmas. "Riparian rights," she whispered, pulling out her magnifying glass. "Haven't seen that in a long time." Back in engineering school, our professor taught us one big thing. Water rights are like the Wild West of property law. Most people think if you buy land by a lake, you own to the water's edge and that's it. But some old deeds include riparian rights. That means you don't just own the land. You own the right to use the water for docks, boats, swimming, whatever. I remembered thinking it sounded too good to be true. Turns out my deed had those magic words, including riparian rights to the high water mark. "This is interesting," Dolores said, fixing her thick glasses. "Mind if I dig deeper?" I love a good mystery. 20 minutes later, she came out from the back room, looking like she'd found oil. The smell of really old papers came from the folders in her arms. "Mr. Morrison," she said, spreading papers on the counter, "your property has some very unusual history." Here's where things got absolutely wild. I didn't just inherit a house from some far-off relative. I inherited water rights from 1923, when my great-uncle, Theodore Morrisina name. I sort of remembered from family get-togethers, talked the county into letting him build a dam across a natural creek. Theodore was a flood control engineer who sold the county on making this lake to stop flooding downstream, while giving locals a nice fishing spot. Smart guy, that Theodore. He kept forever water management power in the original deal. I drove home in a daze, gravel crunching under my tires. As my brain tried to process this big surprise, Brenda wasn't just wrong about my docksha, had zero legal power over anything I did with the water. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a boat propeller. That evening, I went to Brenda's emergency board meeting, the community center. Smelled like strong carpet cleaner and burnt coffee from a pot that probably hadn't been cleaned since the Clinton days. About 15 neighbors showed up, most looking like they'd rather be at the dentist. Brenda had a full PowerPoint, protecting our investment, the dock crisis. She'd even brought her brother-in-law, some lawyer in a $1,000 suit, who kept checking his fancy watch like he'd charged by the minute. "This non-matching structure threatens our property values," Brenda said, clicking through slides comparing. "My nice dock, 2 rusty old ones from who knows where. We must act fast to keep our standards." The lawyer nodded seriously. "The HOA has clear power under community rules to control all waterfront structures." I stood up, pulled out Dolores's copied papers, and calmly dropped my legal bomb. "According to these county records," I said, "my property includes water management power from when this lake was made. The HOA has no say over my water stuff." The room went silent except for the buzzing lights overhead like angry bees. The lawyer's confident look melted fast like ice cream on hot pavement. "That's impossible," Brenda sputtered, her face turning red like a fire truck. "Those papers must be old. Community rules beat individual rights." Margaret Morgan, a retired real estate lawyer from Lakeshore Drive, cleared her throat. "Actually, riparian rights usually come before HOA rules and stay valid no matter what." You could almost hear Brenda's blood pressure going up. "This is ridiculous. One selfish homeowner can't hold our whole community hostage." "Ma'am," I replied, keeping my voice steady, "I'm not holding anyone hostage. I'm just using the same property rights you'd want to protect. The meeting broke into whispers and nervous looks. 2 board members even said sorry for the quick deadline. But Brenda went full angry. "We're hiring a real lawyer to fight these fake papers," she announced. "This community won't be bullied by old tricks." Walking to my truck after, Margaret Morgan came up beside my door like a helpful friend. "Garrett," she said quietly, "I helped research this HOAS start 15 years ago. I think there might be big problems with their original papers. Driving home under a sky full of stars, I realized this was just the start." 3 days later, Brenda launched her counterattack with the subtlety of a train crashing through a glass shop. She called an emergency community meeting for Saturday morning with fancy printed flyers that probably cost more than my electric bill. The headline yelled, "Protecting Millbrook Lake from Legal Tricks and Property Value Damage." You had to admire her love for drama. The community center was packed. Like a can of sardines, Brenda had turned the space into her own courtroom. With a projector screen and her brother-in-law lawyer at a folding table like he was running an old-time trial, the whole place smelled like strong coffee and worry. "Ladies and gentlemen, Brenda!" announced, clicking through slides comparing my dock to rusty messes from abandoned spots. "We face a big threat to our community's stability. One homeowner is using made-up papers to get around real HOA power." Made-up papers? My engineer's blood started to boil. I'd seen lots of building fights over the years, but calling things fraud was like starting a war. Her lawyer, let's call him Mr. Expensive Suit, nodded seriously. "These so-called riparian rights are old tricks that don't matter in modern community rules. The HOA has full power under current rules." That's when I realized Brenda had made a key mistake. She was so busy attacking me, she'd forgotten to actually check the law. The next morning, armed with more coffee and a growing feeling that Theodore was a sneaky genius, I went back to Dolores's records desk. "Need to see everything about how this lake system was made," I told her. Maps, contracts, building reports, all of it. Dolores disappeared into the back like she was on a mission. An hour later, she came out with folders thick enough to stop a door, her eyes shining like she'd solved a puzzle. "Your great-uncle Theodore," she said, "spreading out maps from 100 years ago, wasn't just building a dam. He was fixing the county's whole flood problem." The papers showed an amazing story. In 1923, spring floods wrecked 3 areas downstream every year. Theodore suggested a big fix. Dam Millbrook Creek, make a holding lake system, and build extra channels too. Handle water surges. The county was so desperate, they gave him free rein. His original deal gave him forever power over all water flow in the township areas. A deal so complete, it made my head spin. Theodore didn't just own the lake. He controlled every creek, stream, and ditch that fed into the whole water system. "But wait," Dolores said with a grin like she was saving the best part. "There's more." She pulled out payment books from decades ago. County had been putting yearly water management fees into a trust account money I never knew about.
Oh.
Current amount with all the interest added up was $847,000. I stared at those numbers, my coffee getting cold in my hands. Brenda was threatening to fine me $500 a day for using rights worth almost $1 million. That evening, Margaret Morgan came to my kitchen table with her legal tools, reading glasses, notepads, and a smile like a lawyer who'd smelled trouble. "This is amazing," she said, studying Theodore's contracts by my kitchen light. "Your great-uncle basically became a private water company. These rights don't just beat HOA power, they beat almost everything." "Margaret," I said, watching her take quick notes, "what happens if an HOA has been working outside their legal limits?" She looked up like she'd solved a fun puzzle. "Well, if they've been taking fees for water access they don't control, charging for permits they can't give," she trailed off, doing math. "We need to look at their startup papers right away. If this HOA was set up without checking existing water rights, their whole legal base might be like sand." The next evening I went to Brenda's follow-up community unity meeting, her try to get support after last week's legal surprise. This time, I came ready. When she opened the floor for questions, I stood up with a folder of Theodore's water deals. "Mrs. Thornfield," I said like we were chatting, "before we talk about dock rules, I'm curious. Did the HOA get water rights? Approval when it started 15 years ago? The room went super quiet. Brenda's confident smile flickered like a bad bulb. That's not important, she stammered. We're talking about current standards. Actually, I went on. Since the HOA has been taking water access fees from homeowners, I assume you have papers proving you control those rights, her brother-in-law lawyer suddenly got very interested in his briefcase. 3 board members looked worried at each other. This meeting isn't about your made-up claims, Brenda snapped, her cool breaking like thin ice. Ma'am, I replied, these aren't made up. They're recorded with the county and backed by 90 years of legal history. Want to see the payment records? Walking home under the stars, I realized Brenda had just made her second big mistake. She'd challenged an engineer to a paperwork fight, Brenda's. Next move was so mean and predictable, I almost liked her dedication to being awful. 2 days after I embarrassed her at the meeting, I woke up to the awful sound of wood breaking and my neighbor Jake pounding on my front door at 6:30 a.m. through my kitchen window. I saw what used to be my dock now looking like a giant beaver. Had a tactic, Garrett, Jake shouted, still in his bathrobe and slippers. You gotta see this mess. Rick Thornfield's boat was floating about 50 yards out, engine running softly. Rick stood at the wheel with a face that said, Who? Me? The corner of my Dockley spot where Sarah and I planned a memorial bench was in pieces like broken dreams. Mechanical failure, Rick yelled across the water, waving his hands like he couldn't help it. Throttle got stuck in forward. Rial. Sorry about the damage. I'll help clean up. Sure, Rick. I guess the Easter Bunny uses your boat for fun rides. I walked down to check the damage, my bare feet stepping on sharp bits like a painful game. The smell hit me right away. Diesel fuel mixing with lake water, and 30 years of my building pride turned to floating junk. Of all the places Rick could have accidentally hit, he picked the one that meant the most to me, in engineering school. They teach you to spot patterns. When someone threatens your stuff on Monday and accidentally wrecks it on Wednesday, that's not a machine problem. That's dumb crime. But here's the cool thing about being an engineer. We record everything. While Rick was probably celebrating his smart sabotage plan with Brenda, I was quietly setting up security cameras and calling in favors from 30 years of work friends. That afternoon, as I fixed the broken part with fresh wood that smelled like New Hope, Margaret called with news that made Rick's boat stunt seem small. I've been digging into the HOA's startup papers, she said, her voice excited like a lawyer finding treasure. Garrett, they never did proper water rights checks when they formed. State law says any waterfront HOA must document existing riparian rights before claiming control. I stopped hammering mid-swing, the nail half in. English version? This HOA has been running illegally for 15 years. Every fee they've taken, every fine, every water rule, it's all not legal. They're like a restaurant without a health permit, but instead of bad food, they've been giving bad legal rules. While Margaret explained HOA law details, I heard a familiar engine noise coming near. Rick's boat was doing another check, this time with Brenda on it, like a queen on her boat. They came close enough I could smell her fancy perfume fighting. Rick's exhaust. Doc's looking good, Morrison. Rick called with fake cheer like a car salesman. Real shame about that machine problem. Can't trust old engines, you know? Brenda sat there like a store mannequin, her big sunglasses reflecting the sun while she stared at my fixes like a general planning the next attack. That evening, my insurance company called. Rick had filed his accident report, a story so practiced it could be in a play, about his hero tried to avoid hitting despite the bad throttle. But Rick and Brenda had made one deadly mistake. They thought they were dealing with some sad widower who'd give up. Nobody told them. Messing with an engineer is like poking a sleeping dragon with a sharp stick. Thursday evening, made smartphone calls. First, to Tom Rodriguez, a boat mechanic, who owed me from a bridge job. Second, to Detective Collins from County Water Patrol. Third, to Patricia Valdez, a water rights lawyer who makes HOA bullies cry. Boat sabotage. Patricia laughed when I told her, that's new for my job. But if you prove they meant to damage property protected by federal water rights, that's serious crime. Friday morning brought my team, the insurance guy, Detective Collins, Tom with his tools, and enough papers, to bury a desk worker. While they checked the wreck, I showed the security video that would make Rick sad. Tom's check was like a poem. This throttle was changed on purpose, he said, pointing to new marks. Someone fixed it to stick in forward. This wasn't a breakdown. This was planned dumb boat crime. Detective Collins took notes and photos. Mr. Morrison, based on this, will charge for criminal mischief, insurance fraud, and wrecking protected property. That afternoon, Rick got a surprise visit from deputies with handcuffs and serious faces. By sunset, the neighborhood was buzzing like a beehive, and Brenda learned being married to a criminal wasn't in her leader plans. A weekend. While Rick was learning orange jumpsuits don't look good, Margaret and I turned my kitchen table into a command center for the most shocking family secret since finding out your grandpa sold illegal booze. Sweet Jesus on a bicycle, Margaret whispered, her glasses almost falling as she opened a folder marked Morrison Water Trust, confidential county records. The papers inside smelled like old books and hidden power, that dusty smell of documents quietly changing the world while everyone watched TV. What we found didn't just change my spot, it rewrote the whole game. Theodore Morrison, my odd great uncle I barely remembered from kid family parties, hadn't just built a little lake for fishing. He'd engineered himself into the water king of half the county. The 1923 deal was a smart legal masterpiece. When the county begged Theodore to fix their bad floods, he didn't just make one dam. He built a connected water system for 3 areas. In trade, they gave him full control over all water sharing in the county water boundaries. Translation, I didn't just own the lake. I own the water supply for 15,000 people. Look at this payment book, Margaret said, her voice surprised as she spread out decades of money records like treasure. The county had been putting yearly fees into a trust since 1950. Current balance, $847,000 plus 70 years of interest. I nearly choked on my coffee. Nobody told me about this money. Classic office mix-up, Margaret explained. The county sent reports to Theodore's estate lawyers thinking someone was handling it. The lawyers filed stuff, thinking the county was doing the daily work. Everyone did their part, but no one connected when Theodore died. But the real big bomb was in Millbrook Lake. States' building papers from 2009. The builders thought the lake was regular. Public water run by the county. They'd never checked old WaterRights, never looked at history, never found their whole waterfront spot was built on someone else's water property. This HOA, Margaret said, tapping her pen on the evidence, has been acting like they own water rights they never had. Every dock permit, boat rule, water fee, they've taken it's all not legal. The size of my inherited power was huge. Full control over Millbrook Lake and its feeding network. Rule power over 3 main creeks for nearby areas. Environment watch for the county's east stormwater. Power over to city water intake spots. Final say on any building affecting water areas. Owned more water power than some small cities. But here's the really fun irony. Margaret went on, pulling out the HOA's insurance papers. If they've been running without legal water rights, their insurance might be worthless. All those pricey building deals Rick pushed the community could ask for all the money back. My engineer brain started figuring the falling effects. Brenda hadn't just been illegally bugging me. She'd been running a fake group that took hundreds of thousands in fees for stuff they couldn't give. Margaret, I said, staring at papers that basically made me a private water company. What if I decided to use these rights fully? Her eyes lit up like a lawyer spotting a winning ticket. You could stop boat traffic, control water levels, halt waterfront building, handle environment checks, and watch city water ops. In other words, you could shut down half the county's water setup before breakfast. But with big power comes the scary fact that you're now in charge of not messing up thousands of lives. The question wasn't if I could wreck Brenda's little HOA kingdom. It was if I was smart enough to use this power wisely. Monday morning, I did what any normal person does when they accidentally inherit enough water rights to hold a county hostage. I gathered a legal team like superheroes. First call the Patricia Valdez, the water rights lawyer Margaret suggested. Patricia showed up Tuesday afternoon looking like she could make peace deals before lunch and still take down a bad city council by dinner. She drove a fancy electric car and carried a briefcase that probably cost more than Rick's boat. Mr. Morrison, she said, sitting in my kitchen while quickly reading Theodore's papers, like studying for a test. In 30 years of water law, I've never seen private rights this strong. You don't just own water, you own the pipes for half the county. Next came Dr. Lisa Morgan, an environment engineer who knows watershed stuff and talks like my engineer brain. She arrived with science gear like a small space mission and the quiet sureness of someone who knows her stuff. This is great, she said, looking at Theodore's maps while her laptop showed live data. Your great-uncle built a flood stop network that's still saving millions in damage every spring. This isn't just about beating an HOA, it's about protecting a whole nature system. Margaret brought her legal fight skills and a list of contacts that scare city officials. Jake offered his building know-how and acted as our inside guy in HOA stuff. Plus, he made coffee strong enough to wake a ghost. But our secret weapon was Dolores, who'd been quietly watching this mess from the county records for 15 years. "Sweetie," she said, spreading papers on my table like cards in a game, "I've been waiting for someone to show this HOA's WaterRights dream is fake. They've been taking fees for power they don't have. And honey, that's called fraud where I come from." Our first team meeting felt like planning a heist if heists used tons of papers and nature law instead of booms and fast cars. The smell of Jake's strong coffee mixed with the vanilla scent of old papers. While we planned Brenda's legal fall, Patricia laid out our big options. Your water rights don't just beat HOA power. They beat almost everything federal nature law, state utility rules, city laws. They all respect old water deals. Here's something they don't teach in homeowner books. When you inherit land with old utility rights, you also get what's called successor liability. Basically, you become in charge of keeping up systems that whole communities need. It's like getting your grandpa's house and finding the basement has the city's main power grid. Dr. Morgan's nature check gave good and scary news. Theodore's building is still solid, but the dam needs $2. $3 million in fixes within 5 years. The county planned $400,000, not knowing they don't control it. The nice irony, my trust money, grown from county payments, could pay for most fixes. Jake's inside info was super helpful. Brenda's been using Rick's building deals like her own money machine. No bids from others, no board watch, no quality checks. The community center's wires are held with tape and prayers. We recorded ongoing money abuse, fake contracts, high prices, and fees for stuff the HOA couldn't legally do. Rick charged top dollar for cheap work while Brenda covered for him. Margaret found the worst scam. Homeowners paid water access fees when buying houses, money going straight to HOA,